But our curriculum does not need decolonizing for the simple reason that it is not colonized. We should not apologize for the fact that British children primarily study the history of these islands. And it goes without saying that the recent fad to decolonize maths, decolonize engineering, decolonize the sciences that we have seen across our universities to make race the defining principle of what is studied is not just misguided, but actively opposed to the fundamental purpose of education. The curriculum, by its very nature, is limited. There are a finite number of hours to teach any subject, and what we haven't heard in this debate from those members who want more added to it on both sides of the House is what necessarily must be taken out. Perhaps we'll get to that on another day. Members such as the member for Islington North and many others have raised the Black Lives Matter movement. The member for Streatham raised the education guidance and believes that we're trying to stop children from becoming activists. I believe another member, apologies, I've forgotten who it was who mentioned it. However, what we are against is the teaching of contested political ideas as if they are accepted fact. We don't do this with communism, we don't do this with socialism, we don't do it with capitalism. And I want to speak about a dangerous trend in race relations that has come far too close to home to my life, and it is the promotion of critical race theory, an ideology that sees my blackness as victimhood and their whiteness as oppression. I want to be absolutely clear. This government stands unequivocally against critical race theory. Some schools have decided to openly support the anti-capitalist Black Lives Matter group, often fully aware that they have a statutory duty to be politically impartial. Black lives do matter, of course they do, but we know that the Black Lives Matter movement, capital BLM, is political. I know this because at the height of the protest, I saw white Black Lives, I've been told of white Black Lives Matter protesters calling, and I'm afraid I apologize for saying this word, calling a black armed police officer guarding Downing Street a pet nigger. That is why we do not endorse that movement on this side of the House. It is a political movement, and what would be nice would be for members on the opposite side to condemn many of the actions that we see this political movement instead of pretending that it is a completely wholesome anti-racist organization. There is a lot of pernicious stuff that is being pushed, and we stand against that. We do not want to see teachers teaching their white pupils about white privilege and inherited racial guilt. And let me be clear, any school which teaches these elements of critical race theory as fact, or which promotes partisan political views such as defunding the police without offering a balanced treatment of opposing views, is breaking the law. Mr. Speaker, in her speech, the member for Brent Central says she hoped I'd learn something from her. Now it's time for me to give her a couple of lessons too, although I don't believe she's in her place. She said in her speech, we need to look at history and we need to improve it. Lesson number one, you cannot improve history, you can only learn from it. What we can improve is the future, and that is what this government has been doing over the last 10 years. I won't reel out statistics in the interest of time. Other members on this side of the House have already done so. Lesson number two, Black history is not the history of institutional racism. Listening to some members across the House, it's quite clear that they don't know the difference. It is not true, as the member for Liverpool Riverside said, that African history was interrupted by slavery. Also shows an ignorance of geography, because West African history is different from African history. As probably the only member of this House who actually grew up and went to school in Africa, I can tell you that's not what we're taught. Much more is taught about the history of black slave traders who existed before and after the transatlantic slave trade. In fact, the most notable statue in the city of Lagos, where I grew up, is that of Madam Tinubu. It's the biggest one. It's now equivalent to Trafalgar Square. She was a slave trader, but she was also a freedom fighter and a much-loved icon. Her slave trading is not celebrated, but her fight against colonizers is. In Nigeria, she is recognized as a complex character, as all historical figures are, and heaven help anyone who would try to pull her statue down. There is much that we can learn from Nigeria about how to handle the issue of statues. But why does this issue mean so much to me, Mr. Speaker? It's not just because I'm a first-generation immigrant. It's because my daughter came home from school this month and said to me, we're learning Black History Month because every other month is about white history. This is wrong, and this is not what our children should be picking up. These are not the values I have taught her. They are instead yet another sign of the pernicious identity politics that looks at individuals primarily as groups of biological characteristics. People often don't realize when it has taken hold, and I know that many of them are well-meaning. But what I really want to finish with is the story of Tom Molyneux. He was a black boxer who freed himself from slavery in the US, and he moved to England in 1809. I would have said so much more, but I'm out of time, Mr. Speaker. But what his story tells us is that this is a country that welcomes people, and that black people from all over the world have found this to be a great and welcoming country. These are the values as a black woman I'm teaching my black daughter. We must never take it for granted. And this Black History Month, let us celebrate the black talent we are blessed with, the progress we have made in accepting one another, and the contribution black people have made in making us who we are as a nation. Thank you.